It's welcome to We the People with Tricia Flanagan. I am so excited about our guest tonight. It is George Papadopoulos. He is the author of Deep State Target, and this is a broadcast that you do not want to miss. Hopefully, you've read his book. And if you haven't read his book, I'm sure you have heard his story, his personal account with being a deep state target. And we are going to see, I think, from his testimony, some strong resemblances to what is going on with President Trump, with the raid on Mar-A-Lago, and what is going on with his inner circle. We just saw last night that Mike Lindell was targeted. His phone was confiscated by the FBI. We have some serious issues cropping up with our constitutional rights. And if they touch President Trump, he was right. They're not just after him. They're after every patriot in America. So we're going to have some great insight. We're going to look at this through the lens of George Papadopoulos, who has lived this horror with the deep state. So we can't wait to get to that. But first, I want to introduce Michelle Albergo, everybody's favorite. Welcome to the show. She is still the boss lady. You know her as my director, the director of my congressional campaign, and now she is the executive producer of We the People with Tricia Flanagan. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Tricia. It's great to be back again working with you. Always a pleasure working with Tricia Flanagan. So yeah, we have some big issues going on in this country. Your show is going to cover a lot of these issues that are going on, not only currently, but we look back into history, we could see why we are where we are at this point. And I'm going to help line up some phenomenal guests moving forward. And this is going to be a show that hopefully will bring. It's going to be all about bringing out the truth and giving clarity to our viewers about what's happening in our country right now. It's never been more important if people are not engaged in what's happening in real life today, which is playing out like a movie thriller, which I really don't want to be in right now, and I don't think anybody else in this country does. But it's time to start paying attention to what's going on. It's time to do that. We cannot sit back and let them take our country. That is exactly what they're doing. And Tricia, to your point, President Trump would always say, it's not me they want, it's you. I'm just in the way. And at this point, they've actually not only been going after President Trump, obviously with Mar-a-Lago, but we see what they're doing with the whole Trump inner circle and even some of the outer circle. And eventually they are going to, with the IRS and the 87,000 IRS workers, who do you think they're going to target with those people? So the alphabet and the three-letter agencies are out for us, and we need to turn this ship around. We got to do it quickly, and people have to wake up, and that's how we're going to do it.
That's right, and that's what this show is dedicated to. It's all about a government of, by, and for the people, and we the people are ready to stand up and show out. We've got a big midterm coming up. I would argue this is the most impactful midterm of probably our entire country's history. Wouldn't you agree, Michelle?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like every election lately we've been saying that, but this is the real important one. We have to take back control of the House and the Senate, and it has to be done so we can stop the hemorrhaging that's happening right now in our country. There's not one indicator going on, whether it be the economy or the border. There's nothing right now that's going in the Biden regime's favor. I don't think they can point to any success, even though he was on TV yesterday celebrating something while the stock market was in free fall. We're not stupid. We know what's going on. And for those who aren't paying attention, that's what we're here for. So we can help them see the light, see the truth, and show them the way. And this is awesome. I'm glad to be here. I don't want to keep you guys because I can't wait for you to get into this show. I will hop back on if you want later on after you guys wrap up. And I just want to toss it right over to you and bring on our guest.
It sounds great. So without further ado, Michelle, you'll pop back. We're going to talk about upcoming shows. So stay tuned to the end of the program. And again, this is an interview you do not want to miss. So Michelle, I'm going to pull you into the back room and I'll talk to you in a little bit. Okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Have a great interview.
Thanks. All right. Without further ado, I am bringing on our guest extraordinaire, the great George Papadopoulos, author of Deep State Target. Welcome to the show, George. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Tricia. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And, I want to jump right in. Anybody that has read your book knows that it reads like the sequel to a Jason Bourne movie or novel. But it's, it's far, far more horrific than that, isn't it? I mean, you lived through being, as the title of your book says, a deep state target. And I think we're seeing some similarities with what's going on right now. But you said something very interesting in your book. You said, this is what happens when you work for Trump. Those words were sobering, especially with what's going on now. What share with us? That was right at the beginning of the book when you started to realize what exactly was happening to you. What did that mean to you then, and how does that translate into what's going on now?
Wow, you brought back some very interesting memories, and I'm glad you did remember that very dark quote from the book. And that quote was from FBI agents, by the way. And let me just get into the context of what that was about, how my story really fits into the greater story of what's happening even today with Mar-A-Lago and the raid on various Trump Inner Circle associates. If you had asked me 6 years ago if a deep state even existed, I probably would have laughed and just, kind of smirked and said, it's conspiracy stuff. Before I worked on both Ben Carson and Trump's presidential campaigns, I was really in a very establishment type of working environment in Washington, D.C. A lot of ex-Reagan people, George H.W. Bush officials, George W. Bush officials, some of even the architects of both the Iraq and Afghanistan war were basically working at the same think tank that I was working at. So you can really understand the years leading up to me working on two renegade presidential campaigns. So in 2015, I was looking at the political circle. We were in the middle of a presidential campaign season, and I saw that people like Jeb Bush, or even Marco Rubio, or some of these other folks really didn't represent what the American people wanted back then. Back then, what the American people wanted were jobs brought back to America, the border secure, and to stop ISIS from cutting people's heads off. That's what Trump really was focusing in on. He had that positive, coherent, concise message that not only resonated with me, but with millions of other Americans. So I decided to join two renegade campaigns, first with Carson, then with Trump. And immediately upon joining these campaigns, I started to really realize that there was an entrenched system or a deck stacked against these outsider candidates. And what do I mean by this? Right when I joined Trump's campaign, I have various diplomats who we later find out were spies meeting with me. I had the FBI throwing honeypots at me, which a honeypot is basically a pretty woman that the FBI or the CIA sends at you to try and entrap you into something illegal. It didn't work on me. And they were trying to do it with General Flynn, with others. They even wiretapped Trump Tower, as the president has mentioned numerous times. So this is what happens when you work with Trump, quote for my book was exactly what we're talking about today. It's the entrenched bureaucracy, the deep states, trying to prevent an outsider from ever getting to the Oval Office and shaking things up, and they will stop at nothing to get that initiated. I was the first casualty of this, but we have seen the strategy become much more dangerous and insidious now with the unprecedented raid of Mar-A-Lago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and scroll forward, it's deja vu all over again, isn't it? And we saw it started with the raid on Mar-A-Lago, and that's been in the works for quite some time. I mean, this has been the Biden DOJ, the Biden regime has wanted to set this up for a number of reasons, in my opinion. I'd like to share a theory that I have with you after we kind of get the meat and potatoes out. But I think that this has been a long time coming. The quick and easy fix that they're getting by this is that they're trying to taint President Trump before another presidential run. I think they know that he'll win, and they're trying to do all they can to taint him as a president, as his character, the whole 9 yards. But I think that the additional goal is more nefarious. I think it's linked to globalist goals as well. But walk me through when you see Steve Bannon, when you see what they intended to look like a perp walk, You know, they want to make this as visible and as painful as possible, sending a clear message that, you know, don't associate with President Trump because this is what's going to happen. And it goes to that quote in your book. I mean, the other thing is you describe those who arrested you as an army of terror. I thought that was so impactful and so poignant. Do you recognize some of these same characteristics in what happened at the Mar-A-Lago raid and how the, you know, these other Trump associates and affiliates are being targeted? And do you see a larger global connection in what this nefarious goal is by the Biden regime?
Wow. Okay. So in 2016, the deep state, the Obama DOJ, and their ability to prevent the smooth transition of power from Obama to Trump was a lot more subtle, or at least they hoped it would have been a lot more subtle, a lot more quiet. They thought it would really be a silent coup, and that's why you had the FBI colluding with the media to perpetuate this propaganda about Russia collusion, about Trump not being a viable president, that he was installed by the Kremlin, that he was illegally appointed, so that they could really overthrow him either through impeachment or possibly other means. And that's really what Mueller was all about. Mueller was never there to investigate anything. And I'm talking as somebody who's lived this from the inside out. Mueller was there to cover up the legal spying, the legal behavior and activities of the Comey politicized FBI. That's exactly why once Comey got fired, then they got Mueller appointed through Rosenstein because Trump started to sense that there was something illegal going on behind the scenes. Trump began to understand that there was an illegal effort to overthrow him, and that's why I believe he smelled Comey out and he rightfully fired him. So then Mueller came in, and as Trump is fighting back against being framed the way he's been doing recently, they were threatening him with obstruction like they are today. So it's the same playbook. The only difference between what happened back then is, like I said, it was really the first time in modern history that a coup effort was publicized. So I think that they were trying to keep it as low temperature, as quiet as possible. But now that Durham is exposing what the FBI did, he's indicting FBI lawyers. There's a trial next month of Christopher Steele's top source, Igor Danchenko. The FBI and the DOJ under Merrick Garland are running amok. They're desperate to intimidate and to silence the Trump voters, the Trump supporters, and the Trump inner circle from not holding rallies anymore, not getting America First patriots elected in the most important midterms right around the corner, and to prevent Trump from running again in 2024. So it's really a throw the kitchen sink at this and see what sticks kind of effort by the DOJ. It's going to fail. And I think Durham has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, and he's going to expose a lot next month with this new trial.
We are all at the edge of our seat ready to see this because I think things are coming to a head. You know, you also said in your book that you knew who was pulling the strings. You knew who was targeting you. And, you know, I'd love to hear more about that. And I'd love to weave that into this larger issue that's going on now. Do you see connections? Do you see this as a continuation of what you went through? Do you think that the same bad actors are at work? Do you see, you know, when you say that you knew who targeted you, who were you talking about?
So you mentioned a very important point about the globalist agenda. And like I said, if we had been having this interview 6 years ago, I probably would have laughed at these questions or I would answer, but I have an answer now because I lived this agenda. And the reason it's so important about this globalist agenda that you mentioned is because we have to remember what was going on in 2016. In 2016, you had 2 terms of Obama who was pushing a globalist agenda with the EU and the countries in Southeast Asia, including Japan, Australia, that were all trying to do 2 things. One, they wanted to push the TPP, which was the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreements, which would have basically wiped out and decimated even more US industries and outsourced more jobs to the Asian economies while destroying American jobs. And in Europe, what you had was Brexit. That was the hot topic and the potential destruction of the European Union model. So Trump was the only candidate or powerful political voice at that time that was pro-Brexit. He believed that countries should be sovereign, that the United States should have transactional relationships with individual countries and not as part of these super blocs like the EU or the Trans-Pacific Partnership in Southeast Asia. And that's why the president was actually so successful in his foreign policy and his economic policy, because that's how he dealt with foreign countries. He dealt with Japan at a bilateral level. He dealt with the UK at a bilateral level, and that allowed the United States to have more leverage. Now, the reason I'm giving this context is because, of course, when you have an outsider candidate like Trump discussing Brexit, discussing ripping up these trade agreements that Obama had put in place and that Clinton was supposed to continue, of course you're going to have foreign countries and foreign governments and interests and the media and all the various groups that have vested interest in these pacts going against the candidate. And that's why I want the viewers to, if they get one thing out of what I'm saying, I want them to understand that is exactly why you have people like Christopher Steele, who was an MI6 British agent involved in writing the Steele dossier and setting this entire thing in motion to try and overthrow Trump. That's why you have this Australian diplomat, Alexander Downer, meeting with me and recording me and spying on me while under the guise of a friendly meeting, and why you're getting more information about potentially countries like even Italy and other countries involved in what was really going on. So that is the global context of why people need to understand why these foreign governments and foreign interests were really against Trump and pro-Clinton, and why we're seeing that continue today.
And the rabbit hole gets deeper and deeper, doesn't it? And you know, you talk a lot in your book about your extensive foreign policy experience, and I was very interested to do a deep dive in what you outlined as the fallout of the Arab Spring. And I thought you put together a very interesting perspective on, Israel is our most important ally, both morally, both, I would argue, biblically and strategically as well. And when you look at how the Middle East is dividing up, and when you look at how Turkey had been our very close ally, but you proposed an interesting solution. You proposed more of a closer relationship with Greece. And that would, in turn, be something that we could leverage with Israel, and with Turkey becoming more and more affiliated with radical Islamist states like Iran. And now, when you see how everything has developed recently with the pullout of Afghanistan, I'm interested to find out if you see any data points that we can knit together in regard to what was going on then and what's going on now.
Well, sure. This is actually a very important topic, and it really explains how the Comey FBI and then Mueller were able to infiltrate the campaign through illegal spying. You just mentioned that, yes, and I explained that I was working in DC for years. I had many extensive contacts with foreign governments. That was my job. I was a foreign policy advisor to both Carson and Trump's campaign. So I assume I should have had at least a couple contacts to do my job correct. General Michael Flynn had the same exact thing. He was the head of the DNI. He's a general, and he worked in his position for decades. So of course he had numerous foreign ties, cooperation ties that he just did under the guise of his work. Paul Manafort was also a consultant who had dealings in Ukraine. The story with him, he has his book that I recommend people go check out. Now, what the FBI did under Obama and Rosenstein and then were use our foreign ties that we had just under normal conditions and allege that we were spies of some nature, that I was some sort of Israeli spy. And this isn't the Rosenstein memo. This isn't me saying it. If you Google the Rosenstein memo, for what he used to appoint Mueller, he said, we're appointing Mueller because we have suspicions Papadopoulos is an Israeli spy. We have suspicions that Michael Flynn is a Russian spy. We have suspicions that Manafort's a Ukrainian spy, and we have suspicions that Trump is colluding with the Russians. So they use this bizarre context to paint this general brush on anybody who had foreign contacts to just say, oh, they must be a spy. We have to spy on them, and we have to make sure that Trump isn't doing anything with the Russians. And that's really how they were able to infiltrate the campaign. And it goes back to my work. We would have to talk a lot about it, but I highly recommend everybody reads the book if they want to understand that aspect with Israel, with Greece, with Turkey, and how it fits into the present situation. Because when you read about the honeypot that the FBI sent at me, she was a Turkish girl. So I'll just leave it at that and let the readers follow, get some hints from the book of why they decided to send a Turkish girl to do what she did against me.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I highly recommend it. If you want to learn about, that aspect of foreign policy, I think that your book is a great resource for that. And I think that's, some of the things that you say roll back up to what we found out later on. It was really the Clinton dossier, right? All of that was funded by the Clinton campaign. She had affiliates that were paying for it as well. The DNC was implicated. And you mentioned Danchenko earlier, and I believe he was the one that took all of that and shopped it around at the Brookings Institute. So this really, Hillary Clinton's initiative and her idea of trying to pin everything on Trump, which was probably even part of the, Strzok and Page insurance policy, those tentacles went deep and wide, didn't they? And I think that, when we look at, try to unpack what's going on there and connect it to what is happening now, that deep state connection, could it be, I'll toss this out here, this is part of my thinking about around what's going on. Hillary Clinton had a famous quote that supposedly, she allegedly said, we don't have her on tape or anything, but she said that if President Trump won in 2016, they would all hang from nooses. Do you think that there is evidence that is within those files that I believe are rightly and legitimately declassified by President Trump? He declassified them before he left the White House, and he brought them to Mar-a-Lago. He's in communication with the National Archives. There was no reason to go in and raid as the FBI did. Do you think that they're looking for something other than documents simply for the National Archives? It just does not smell right when you think, what could be so important that has to be put into the National Archives, but this scorched earth policy, this scorched earth directive that the FBI got, could they be looking for documents that implicate Hillary Clinton, and could this all tie together with what you've been talking about?
Yeah, so let's let the viewers remember, this was an unprecedented raid. Nothing like this has ever happened in American history. We have really begun a very slippery slope with no end in sight. And should Republicans take over in the midterms and likely the next president, what's going to stop them from raiding Joe Biden or Obama's house or personal residence or their files moving forward? So what the Democrats have unleashed upon the American public is nothing less than an upending of our entire constitutional order. So I just want to put that into context of what the raid really was all about. Secondly, we have an ongoing criminal investigation by John Durham. Most people think because he's being silent that John Durham has either stopped his investigation or that there's nothing there. John Durham, if he had nothing there, his probe would have ended 2 years ago. His probe would have ended shortly after I.G. Horowitz's report went public. But do you know what happened after I.G. Horowitz testified publicly in October of 2019 when he said, yes, the FBI did some illegal stuff, but that the entire investigation was justified? John Durham and Attorney General Barr at the time presented separate statements saying we disagree with that, and there's a lot more to the story, and other foreign entities and agencies were involved. So what I think we're seeing moving forward, and why I think the FBI, DOJ under Biden, and all of these groups are raising up the temperature is because Durham has the goods on them. Durham is going to expose the dirty trick that is going to implicate not only FBI lawyers like Kevin Kleinsmith, who are now convicted felons by John Durham, but likely higher up FBI officials and even the Obama White House officials. So I think that is why the timing of this is not really random. The timing of all these raids is to distract and deflect away from what I believe John Durham is going to present to the American public. We can't forget, during the trial of Sussman, John Durham presented to the American public that it was Hillary Clinton who ordered these dossiers and all this information to be leaked to the media, and that they were colluding with the media. We don't know what John Durham is going to come up with during the trial he has coming up next month. And now, finally, same team that's under criminal investigation by John Durham were actually appointed to go and raid Trump's residence in Mar-a-Lago to find files related to the Russiagate disaster. So are they trying to cover something up? Are they trying to destroy files? What has the president declassified? The president was very adamant in the waning days of his presidency, even going back years into his presidency, that he wanted all of the Russia files declassified. So what is this argument about classified files? This is something that Trump's lawyers need to present to the American public and make a clear case of why he is being persecuted and not investigated properly, because it all really ties into, I believe, two things. Coming up and covering up the files that Trump might or might not have had regarding the Russia investigation at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, I think that that's another reason that this is such a delicate moment for this all coming to a head. I mean, the January 6th hearings that were led by, the new best pals, Nancy Pelosi and Liz Cheney. Thank goodness she's leaving Congress. She lost her primary by double digits. But before that whole trial that whole January 6th debacle was concluded, there were so many slings and arrows that were thrown and shot at the president. But I think that shows how afraid they are, because they know that if they don't do something impactful soon, that right after the midterm, we know that we'll be in a presidential election season. I am hoping, and I think we have strong indicators showing that President Trump will run again, and I do believe that he'll win. But in the meantime, we have things coming to a head, like you're saying, with the Durham investigation. Are the Democrats running scared? And is this evidence of it? And the evidence, I want to drill down a little bit more on the potential evidence that could help the Durham investigation. I remember when President Trump was leaving office, he put forward a few executive orders and declassified a lot of information. The question is, where did that land? And I guess, could that be part of what is being protected now? And where will that all land? We have a few months. It's going to get exciting, isn't it?
Look, this is going to be an incredibly hot next couple months politically, and the temperatures are already being raised dramatically. And I want the viewers to remember when this raid actually occurred. The raid on Mar-a-Lago occurred shortly after Trump-endorsed candidates did amazing in their primaries, especially in Arizona. And it showed that Trump today is the unequivocal leader of the Republican Party. He is the voice of the new Republican Party, and his power within it is dominant. His endorsement today is the most important political capital that a candidate can have. You could be an incredibly obscure candidate that no one's heard of, and if Donald Trump says that he endorses you, you likely can beat out your opponent who might have raised millions of dollars more than you simply off of that endorsement. So when Trump was holding these rallies, and I've been watching his rallies a lot, and I analyze them on television sometimes after he's done rallying, his rallies are getting bigger. They're getting more powerful. When he rallies for a candidate, that candidate usually wins. So the raid was designed, in my opinion, to shut him up and to prevent him from rallying anymore, from endorsing candidates, or whatever candidates he has endorsed that won their primaries to now be damaged goods, because of this raid that they conducted on Mar-A-Lago. Now, the DOJ and the Biden administration, I don't think could fathom that this would have had a boomerang effect on their situation. You have many polls, not just conservative polls, but ABC polls and other polls that have come out after the raid, and even independents are questioning what this raid was all about. You have moderate Republicans who were actually souring on Trump before the raid, now saying, you know what, because of the raid, we support him. So they might have thought they were going to silence the guy. It's a boomerang. He's going to be more powerful than ever. And I think he is going to be called Teflon Don moving forward, because everything they throw at the guy just gets repelled off of him, and all of his enemies are collapsing. I know that his inner circle are being targeted. I know I was certainly targeted, and others were targeted, but the best thing that all of us can do, including the president himself and all of his supporters, are not to be afraid, to continue to speak truth, to remain vigilant, to assure that your candidates are vetted, to get the right candidates elected in for the midterms, because as we were talking about earlier, it doesn't matter if a candidate has an R next to his or her name today. You need to make sure that that's an America First candidate. Because if we don't get this midterm right, if we don't get America First candidates elected, we have two bad options. One, a Republican Congress that resembles the George W. Bush GOP, or we have a progressive, leftist, ideologically communist, socialist, Democrat Party running this country unabated for the next 2 years under the Biden administration. So that's why this midterm is incredibly important. And the final thing I'll mention about this midterm is, if we get this right, even if Trump gets reelected in 2024, which I believe he will not have the allies to help him with his domestic agenda. He will go through a series of impeachments over nonsense, the way he went about a phone call, a completely legitimate legal phone call that he presented the transcript to the American public. They still impeached him over that. They weren't giving him $6 billion to build a border wall with Mexico, but they've delivered over $80 billion to Ukraine today. It's insanity. So that is what the importance of a Congress means with the president. Without a working Congress, the president's hands are handcuffed, and that is not good for the American people.
You are so right. We need to put that on loop, and it needs to be chimed into every home in America, because what we have to do is we have to get what I like to call a MAGA majority in Congress. And look, I think we're going to take the majority in the House. We only need 5 seats to do that. I think we stand to gain probably more like 28. We need to get at least a simple majority in the Senate. Unfortunately, we don't have enough seats open and up for re-election in the Senate to give us a filibuster-proof majority, but I believe we can gain as many as 5 seats in the Senate, and that will give us that MAGA majority, that America First majority, that support for President Trump, that when he does get back into the Oval Office, we can start undoing what Joe Biden has put forward. Everything that he's doing, let's face it, outside of executive order, is with a complicit Congress. Once we change that tide, we can start to neuter Joe Biden as early as January of 2023, when the new Congress is in session. And so I think what you just said is one of the most important messages of this midterm. We have to get in there, we have to show up, show out, and make sure that MAGA candidates are elected, especially foreseeing that President Trump might be back in that White House very soon. Let me ask you this, with the stakes being so high, our constitutional freedoms on the line, the DOJ isn't going to stop, are they? How far do you think the Biden DOJ, that's now been weaponized against conservative Americans, how far do you think they'll go?
Like I said, we're in uncharted territory. I would have never imagined in my life that a president's personal residence would be raided by his successor. And not only the successor, but likely his next competitor, and that's Joe Biden, raiding not only his predecessor, but his likely main competitor in 2024 should Joe Biden decide to run again. So that really, I think, shocked the conscience of America, even liberals. If you watch the liberal media shortly after the raid, even on CNN and other channels, even Senator Chuck Schumer, when he was being pressed about this by Maddow, he was hesitant. He didn't know how to respond. He was in shock. I think he saw the writing on the wall about the slippery slope that this created and how the Republicans, in turn, could flip the switch against a Democrat president in the future. And it's just not going to bode well for our country. We're going into banana republic type of territory. And it's not just banana republic territory. You have to look at history. This is a playbook. Mark Twain said it best: history doesn't repeat usually, but it rhymes. While we're probably not going to have a full communist type of takeover that we've seen in China, or a fascist takeover like in Nazi Germany in America, but some of those same tactics of basically weaponizing your justice system against political opponents, intimidating and threatening political opponents and their voters. This is something that never occurred in America before. You've never had also a president that, like Joe Biden did in Pennsylvania last week, basically call out over 75 million Americans as potential terrorists and threats to American security. It's one thing to challenge and question your political opponents and their political ideas, but never to question the legitimacy of your main political party, your political opponent in America. And that's why I think we don't know how far the Biden administration could go. One thing we do know is they're incredibly desperate. And the only thing that I'm doing, and I know the president is doing, is just keep the facts on your side. Assure that you have a strong legal team if they go after you, because right now this looks a lot more like a persecution than a prosecution. And the American people on both sides of the aisle are getting fed up with this. They're seeing through it, and they're going to impact the midterms and the next president. And that's something that I think is going to be the lasting impact of the Biden administration. And that's going to see them wiped out politically in the midterms and him out of office in 2024 because of these disastrous, gross abuses of state power against political opponents.
Perfectly said. What you brought to us tonight is a lens through which we can view not just what has happened in the past, but how the blueprint for what we need moving forward. And if you care, those who are listening, if you care about your freedom, if you want to reclaim it, we have to make it to the polls in the midterm, make sure that we have that majority that we're going to need. And we have to pray, and we have to get President Trump back. We have to get our country back. And, do you have any plans for another book, George? Do you have any plans for, I'm hoping you're going to keep your voice in the public arena. It is so important that you do. But what are your plans for getting the word out now, and perhaps for maybe another book, or how can we get in touch with you and find out more about what you're working on now?
Well, one thing I wanted to make clear how I really got through this. There's a verse in the Bible, 2 Timothy 1:7, and it says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. If anybody is ever going through a difficult moment or a difficult period in life, when you feel that the world is collapsing around you and you do have an entire system targeting at you, like I did, like President Trump did, like 75 million American voters and the Republican Party is today, just remember that quote from the Bible, and you'll get through it. And the reason I bring up this quote is because that is what I continue to use through this journey that I find myself on with millions of God-fearing, patriotic Americans all around the country. I give speeches around the country. I'm going to be speaking at an incredible event in Texas coming up this January that I'll be promoting on Twitter very shortly. So I highly recommend people follow me on Twitter at George Papa 19. And I just want to keep my voice as loud and as strong as possible, because as long as people are hearing the truth, as long as people are interested in the truth, I have faith in our country. The moment the American people turn off the truth or give up or feel that there's no hope, then I worry about this country. So never give up hope in America, never give up hope in yourself, because you can really see miracles happen as long as you keep faith And I have faith in America. I'm not giving up on America. If I didn't give up on America when my world collapsed around me years ago, I'm certainly not giving up on it now. And you're going to see a lot of me, I think, just on television, Fox, programs like yours, Tricia. I like just going out there and talking to the American public, giving them facts, helping educate them on these very important issues that are affecting America today and in the future. So you're going to see a lot of me moving forward, I hope. That's really what I'm doing. I'm just trying to do my civic duty as an American citizen who loves this country.
Oh, well, God bless you for doing that. You have certainly been tried in the fire and you have emerged victorious. And we, the people, are all the better for hearing about that directly from you. And again, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show tonight. I hope you'll keep us informed. Would love to have you back. Would love to hear more from you on your journey. And I can't thank you enough for your courage, your presence, and your voice. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you for joining us, George.
Thank you, Tricia. God bless, and thanks again for having me.
So we've got Michelle back. Boy, I am almost speechless. I mean, what an incredible perspective we were treated to tonight. And this is where we are in our country. That one would have hoped and prayed that what George Papadopoulos went through would have been enough, but it's not for the deep state Democrats. Nothing is ever enough, and that's why I asked them, how far will they go? How far will this Biden regime's weaponized DOJ go? And it sounds like they'll stop at nothing. But we, the people, are going to fight back, aren't we, Michelle?
There's no doubt about that. We're never going to back down. We're never going to give up. Talk about inspirational and informative. I mean, after all he's been through, he loves this country. He's not backing down. And if he can do it, we all can do it. Let's all step up as Americans. Let's take back our country. We have to do it.
We have to, because, as we just talked about, the stakes are so high. And I'll reiterate what I said earlier, that President Trump was right. He said they're not just after him, they're after the American people. And we're seeing that play out right before our eyes. But I agree with you, Michelle, and I agree with George Papadopoulos. We cannot lose hope. We cannot be frightened. God did not give us that spirit of fear. And so what we can do is we can take logical and practical steps. I think that that's comforting for people when we know that there is something that we can do. And I think the first order of action is make a plan to vote. And I want to bring up something that is very important to our viewers. I hear a lot about when people make a plan to vote, they say, well, is my vote going to count? Look at what happened in 2020. We know there was voter fraud. 2,000 mules proved that we need 2,000 arrests. But you and I, Michelle, have been very involved in voter integrity initiatives. We developed something called Operation Eagle Eye, and it's something that puts literally an eye on every ballot, kind of a preemptive audit. That's not going to happen in every state, but there are measures that are being employed to make sure that we have boots on the ground, lawyers ready to file in front of a judge if you feel like your vote is being disenfranchised in any way, shape, or form. Let's talk a little bit about how important it's going to be to regain our faith in our voting process, and what are some practical steps that voters can do to make sure that their vote is counted in every state, in every precinct, in every way, shape, and form.
Well, first of all, we're on to them. So now the spotlight is shining on them. Secondly, I encourage everybody to get involved and volunteer as a poll watcher or to work with your supervisor of elections. Maybe take a tour of their office. They know that they're on notice. Even in conservative areas, we have our eyeballs squarely on our supervisor of elections office. We're watching, and they know it. So that is good. And keeping the public involved in the election process is even better. See something, say something. Even if you're not a poll watcher, if you happen to be there and something looks weird, make sure you report it. There's lawyers on the ground. There's always somebody there to speak to. And that's going to make a difference. And the third thing I'd say is we have to storm the polls. So in the event they are successful in some ways of of trying to steal their election. We have to overwhelm them with numbers. At some point, they just aren't going to be able to catch up. They almost messed up 2020. The reason why voting stopped in those states is because they were overwhelmed and they didn't anticipate the amount of people that were going to turn out. So they had to dig up some ballots really quickly. So overwhelm the polls, get involved, stay alert, and they won't get away with it again.
That's right, and you have some very real experience in this arena. You worked with the Trump campaign on the ground in 2020. You work on the DeSantis campaign. I know you got some family ties in some pretty interesting places in Florida, and you are out. I see how hard you work, Michelle. You're out canvassing for Ron DeSantis to get him reelected. You've been actively involved in making sure that everybody knows the drill, so to speak. And what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, if people have questions that you, I know, can answer, where can people follow you? Where can people get in touch with you? And where can people, ask you some questions if they have any as we lead up to this all-important midterm?
Well, you can reach me at my email is michelle@teamtricia.org. I'm also on Twitter at boldvoice17 and Facebook, Michelle M. Albergo, Getter, Michelle M. Albergo, Truth, Michelle M. Albergo. That's ALBRGO. And yes, I'm very involved with the grassroots and on the local level. I speak to a lot of people. Again, this is something that every single American can do. You can speak to your neighbors. Communication and getting the word out and getting the truth out doesn't necessarily have to be on social media, although that's a great way to do it. Talk to your neighbors. We need to start talking to each other. Let them know what's going on. Get them involved. Get them engaged. This election is the most important election of our lifetime. And we said it last time, and we're saying it this time, but this really, if we don't take it back, I fear we may lose our country. We're seeing tactics I've never seen before. I know you've never seen before. Weaponization of the three-letter agencies, and it's quite scary. Medical freedom out the window. We're going to get to that a little bit too. We got to watch out for a lot of tyranny going on in this country. It's time for it to stop. It's time for us to take back our country. We the people.
We the people will do it. And that's going to bring us to the end of this broadcast. Before we leave our viewers, let's talk a little bit about upcoming broadcasts. You don't want to miss this. We've got some pretty exciting guests that you're working on, Michelle. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Nope. No, just so yeah, we definitely have some great lineup coming up. Well, right now I'm working with Dr. Simone Gold. So in the realm of medical freedom, the COVID-19 pandemic, we say. So she's the founder of America's Frontline Doctors. Very courageous woman, a vocal voice from the very beginning of the pandemic, speaking out against the lack of judgment on some of the medical professionals and Lord Fauci. So yeah, we're working with Dr. Simone Gold. We're hopefully, cross your fingers, we'll have her on either the next week or very soon. Also looking to bring up, we have to talk about the border, the southern border. I'm going to get in contact with some angel moms and hook up with Tom Homan, and let's see what's going on down at the border, because that is a huge problem in this country. We are not a country if we don't have borders, and that's quoting President Trump, and it's true. We have to protect our borders, and right now what's going on down there is a humanitarian crisis, and it needs to be taken care of. So yeah, I'd like to bring on Tom. You probably haven't heard from me yet, but you will be very soon. Tom Homan and Sabine, if you're watching, I'm going to be calling on you too, Sabine Turden-Coulter, to get you guys on here to speak about what's happening at the border. Tricia and I will also probably speak a lot about, recap a little bit of her congressional run. And we'd also like to do, we're going to do like a little kind of a marathon thing on Election Day. We'll be doing the play-by-play like Monday Night Football, the two of us. Right?
Yes. Well, you're right. And you know what you'll get here on We the People is the raw perspective. We are going to bring it to you straight. We've lived it. We've been through this this before, and we know what to look out for, and we are going to report that to you. So we are going to start on election night, probably around 5 p.m. We're going to take it through the polls closing, and we're going to get you the information that you need to hear about what's going on the ground. We have connections in many states. Michelle, as you can probably tell by her backdrop, she's in Florida. I'm in New Jersey, but we have connections all over in almost every state of America, and we'll be bringing you a blow-by-blow detail on what's going on, everything that you need to know for the 2022 midterm. And then right after that, we get right into the presidential election cycle. It's gonna get really good here very soon.
Buckle up.
I know. Buckle up, and we'll talk next time about September. We have a lot of indicators that this is going to be a bumpy month in and of itself. So we'll be bringing you that information as well as soon as we hear it. This is for those of you that follow Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, he wrote extensively and talks a lot about the Shemitah. We are in a Shemitah year, and in fact, the day of the Shemitah is September 26th. And we're looking to reach out, and we would love to have Rabbi Cahn on the show as well to talk about what that really means in the biblical story, in the realm of prophecy. We're going to dig into that because that's what's going on. That's the real story, and that's what we're dedicated to bringing you here at We the People with Tricia Flanagan. So any final thoughts, Michelle, before we wrap up?
Well, I will say this was an incredible show. Had me on the edge of my seat. George, if you're watching, thank you so much for accepting the invitation and coming on the show. It was great information. Nothing like hearing it right from somebody who's lived it, been right in the middle of it. So thank you, George, for coming on the show. Final thoughts. We're going to keep spreading the truth. Nobody's going to shut us down. Nobody's going to shut us up. They can keep trying, but it's never going to happen. Between my voice and Tricia's voice, it's probably close to impossible to do that. But Trish, you did a great job tonight. Congratulations. Loved it. I'm looking forward to watching more of these shows coming up. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, thank you, my friend. I'm honored to be on this journey with you. And let's make the truth great again, right? Let's restore truth in journalism.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank all our viewers for joining us for this inaugural broadcast of We the People with Tricia Flanagan. Stay close. We will be popping in here and there to give you some updates on guests that will be on upcoming shows. And in the meantime, God bless you, God bless America, and God bless our great President, Donald J. Trump. See you next time.
Bye-bye.